Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City veteran jazz bassist Frank Wagner. He spent his childhood in Levittown, New York, and he's promoting his latest 2018 CD called Floating Holiday, and it's a great one. He went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston studying jazz bass with Steve Swallow and Ron McClure. That led to performances all over the world in all-star jazz bands, Broadway shows, national tours, recording sessions, cabaret, society bands, and classical orchestras with legends and luminaries. He went back to school in 1989 as an art major with a minor in psychology, and for the past 10 years plus, he's been practicing music therapy at Brooklyn's Woodhull Hospital and Inpatient Psychiatry and Chemical Dependency Department. He's got fascinating stories and plenty of tales to tell. So please get to know Frank and dig this interview, my friends.
Frank, thanks for taking a minute out, man. I appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. No problem. It's my pleasure.
Let's go ahead and hop right in here and talk about Floating Holiday. Talk to me about this project. How do you feel about it?
Well, Floating Holiday, primarily a collection of tunes that I wrote during my Berklee years studying music there. It also includes some tunes that I recently wrote in 2016. So basically the project is the fulfillment of my desire to re-examine my earlier tunes and to reshape their existing harmonies and rhythms. So in this way I was able to merge the past with the present, as well as to deliver an interesting palette of colors for the listener to experience. So, throughout the years, I graduated Berklee when 18, 19, 22 years old, went there at 18. And throughout the years, though, I've written so many tunes, and I just basically want to get my songs out there. I've been a sideman most of my life, So it was a way for me to just put my tunes out there and play in a jazz trio, which I'm familiar with, piano, bass, and drums, and I had a ball recording it.
So maybe the name of the album should have been Never Too Late, huh?
Possibly Never Too Late, yeah. It's never too late, absolutely. That's my motto.
I like it. So you grew up in Levittown, New York, and I want to know about your childhood. How did you get involved with jazz and fall in love with music?
Sure. Levittown, New York, as you know or you might not know, is a post-World War II community. My dad moved there with my mom in 1952, and he got a great price on a down payment for the house because it was a vet special, they catered to the vets. He was a World War II veteran. And paid $2,000 for the down payment for a Levitt house. I think they bought it for the total was $9,000. And Levittown was such an amazing community to grow up in. It had arts, it had music, and my sister was a dancer. My mom was a piano player who was into the arts. My dad was into sports. He actually played for the Washington Senators in the late 30s. I had a very nice balance with the arts and with sports, and my earliest memories of my mom playing piano. She would play all the American popular standards. At that time they had, the sheet music, Cole Porter, Rodgers and Hart. So I grew up with that. Around 4th or 5th grade or so, maybe a little earlier, I started taking piano lessons, somewhere around 7 years old. So I guess it was earlier than 1st grade. So classical, trained, piano, finally wound up with the bass, electric bass around 7th grade or so, played in a lot of rock bands, bluegrass bands, no jazz at that time, listened to a lot of Paul Butterfield and the Beatles, of course. And then finally, I remember, I think I was a senior in high school, I was at a party and I heard this music that I hadn't heard before. And it was Miles Davis' Round Midnight record that my friend was playing. And I heard the bass player, Paul Chambers, was featured on that tune. And my ears just went, whoa, this is amazing. I want to be like that guy, Paul Chambers. So That's what basically started me into jazz, that Miles Davis record, Round Midnight, and one of my colleagues at school told me about Berklee College of Music. I checked it out. There you have it. You know, at 18 years old, I would be right there. Got accepted into the program.
You graduate from Berklee in 1980. You study with Steve Swallow and Ron McClure. You go out into the world. How ready for the world were you?
Very ready, let me tell you, because Berklee was such an amazing school. I was studying with Gary Burton. I was studying with Mick Goodrick, Pat Metheny, Steve Swallow, of course, and Ron McClure was my first bass teacher there. I changed bass teachers around the second year, and I think Ron left to go on the road, and they brought in Steve Swallow. Steve Swallow, an amazing electric bassist, as you know, is an amazing acoustic bass player, played on many records, so Paul Bley and Jim Hall, and, of course, Gary Burton again. And when I started studying with Steve Swallow, we would play Bach, and we would play duets. Sometimes I'd play the top line, sometimes I'd play the bottom. We'd switch on and off, and he'd give me literature to read. You know, Steve's a graduate of Yale who majored in literature. So Steve would give me philosophy to read. He'd give me musical terms to read, consonance and dissonance, which I totally didn't understand at that age. But as the years went on, I reflected back and said, Steve was a great, great teacher, you know. So Berklee, with all the ensemble playing, the private lessons, I minored in piano, majored in electric bass, but also studied acoustic bass as well with I can't think of it, William Curtis from the Boston Philharmonic. So I was ready. I mean, I could read well, you know, jazz charts, jazz big bands, small bands, playing with many great musicians at Berklee at the time. I was very ready to basically play any gig that was given to me. I thank my dad for helping me through college on that. It was a great investment.
Right on. Well, you've gone on to play with some big shots in the world of jazz. You got Milt Jackson, Tiny Grimes, Joe Puma, Johnny Ray, Eddie Fisher. The list goes on. What did you learn from veterans? You know, it's something that I'm sure they give you their wisdom, but I think by osmosis you capture what you do being around these kinds of people. What did you get from them?
Well, you know, each artist had their own thing, you know. Joe Puma, I remember I did an album with him, and he wrote out the charts. We recorded with a singer. His harmony, his harmonic revisions to standard tunes just floored me. Harmonically, he was so happening. So I learned a great deal of harmonic movement through him and playing with him and just being such an amazing professional, you know. Tiny Grimes, I couldn't believe. I only found out that he was playing a 4-string guitar until about 4 or 5 weeks after I was working with him. Tiny Grimes was such a professional, very gentle man, a humanist, you know, just overall quality of musicianship. Just speaking with these certain individuals who I've played with about just the business of music and how they experienced it, you know. Being adaptable to various changes of music, you know, which I got from Berklee. I always felt very comfortable playing with, you know, even Johnny Ray, which is a totally 360-degree turnaround from Joe Puma or Tiny Grimes or Mel Lewis or whatever. And Johnny Ray was great. I saw how he worked on stage. I saw how he interacted with the audience. I saw how the interplay with the musicians. I got a lot of professional experience working with these guys who had been around for a while, you know. And I think that enabled me to be in working with people at a different level, you know, on a professional level, and being on time for gigs and having the responsibility. If I'm taking a job, I'll be there. I'm not going to sub out, you know, that type of thing, you know.
Well, you know, you've had such a fruitful life in jazz. You've been all over the world. You've been in bands, Broadway shows, tours, recording sessions, cabaret, society bands, classical orchestras. You've been all over the map. So my question is this. Is this something you set out to do? Are you a restless soul that wanted to kind of experience the different flavors of music, or is this just something that kind of evolutionarily speaking happened over your career?
I think it evolutionarily happened over my career. It wasn't something that I knew I was going to do music at a very young age. I knew that from the get-go. So right there, that was a lot of pressure off of me. Some people decided they don't even know what they want to do in their 30s or 40s, you know. So right there, that was great. I went with the flow a lot, you know. Being in New York City at a young age, there were so many musicians in my neighborhood. Jay Anderson lived on the next block on Hell's Kitchen on 47th Street. Warren Marsh was uptown, and Walter Bishop was around. Ira Sullivan was on 42nd Street. You know, so by playing with a lot of these people in New York City, sessions all the time, you know, one thing led to another. You meet this person, you meet this person. Oh, so-and-so is looking for a bass player. So-and-so is looking for someone to go on the road, you know. So I guess the goal for me was always to keep playing in a musical context. I'm very open with playing in musical context. A lot of my friends at that time just wanted to do pure jazz gigs, which I totally, respect, you know. But things happened where I was offered Broadway shows. I was offered to do jingles. I did them. You know, I did Grease. You know, and you go playing Charlie Parker, Little Willie Leaps, and I go into Grease. You know, so all of that just helps me as a musician. You know, whatever a gig, if it was a club date or something, and you're playing top 40, you're playing Madonna. Okay, so these bass lines are kind of cool on some of them, you know, or Michael Jackson, you know, or Motown, you know, because always had my ears open to listening to different genres of music. You know, and just, I guess, evolutionarily speaking, that's how things happened, you know. And plus, as a musician, of course, the goal is to make a living playing music.
Yeah. Without doubt.
So Berklee, again, getting back at Berklee enabled me to be a functional musician, right? Could arrange, you know, could play this, could play that. You know, my love, of course, is jazz. But when the jazz gigs weren't there, you know, when things changed about musicians going on the road and the economy and stuff like that, I had to figure out what I was going to do, you know. So I always kept my doors open, basically.
Speaking of doors open, you know, you have such a creative spirit, and I have a lot of respect for, and I'm fascinated by where your life has gone. You went back to school in '89 to City College to get a major in art and a minor in psychology, and spent the last 10 years practicing music therapy at Brooklyn's Woodhull Hospital. That has to be a fascinating leap of just not only humanity, but expanding who you are and helping others. How has that journey been for you?
Well, you're right. And the journey's been remarkable and incredible, you know, for just enriching my life as an artist, you know, and as a creative artist. As I said earlier, my mom was an artist, so I always had that in me, you know, and I wanted to go back to school after Berklee, being on the road for 15 years or so. I needed some academic stimulation, you know, and a friend told me to check out City College, you know, so I did, and I was interested in psychology. I don't know, tell you, be honest, I don't know how that came about, but I thought that would be an interesting subject to study while I was doing art. And while I was also there, I studied with Ron Carter. I was involved in the music department as well the last 2 years, and Ron could have been responsible, now that I'm looking back at like this whole music therapy thing, because Ron was such an amazing musician. He really taught me a lot about sound, what was coming out of the bass, about walking lines and and just, again, this general musicianship nature of his being, would just really influence me a great deal. And again, we played Bach. As Steve Swallow, we played a lot of Bach. I played a lot of Bach with Ron in his little quartet. We'd play every week. I really started thinking about sound in general because Ron was opened a lot of different ideas up for me. Someone mentioned music therapy. I was married at the time and had a couple kids, and I knew that I couldn't constantly be out on the road, and even though the road gigs were drying up a little, I looked and I checked out music therapy, and I found it very appealing to me because they used a lot of, at least this particular ideology of music therapy, the North and Robbins approach, used a lot of improvisations for music, for their clients. And I said, oh yeah, I can improvise. Graduating City College, I went right into New York University with a 2-year master's in art and specializing in music therapy. From the music therapy perspective, I was so acutely listening to sound and harmony and how the modes are evoking certain moods. The Dorian, the Phrygian, the Mixolydian, the Locrian, the minor modes, and other minor modes. I had been playing, and I learned the modes from Berklee in a very mechanical way. You're playing, you're getting the scales underneath your fingertips, and you're playing through the chord changes, you're doing the right thing. But in music therapy, we listen to the intrinsic emotional moods that are coming from that mode, particular modes, and that changed my whole playing tremendously, from studying music therapy. And, so.
Beautiful. When I look at your career and everything that you've done, all of the different paths you've gone down, all of the different cats you've played with and been all over the world, how do you feel about your career and your life in music?
I love it because, everything kind of like, as you said, I'm going back to your evolution of transitions in life, the evolutionary process. And things just all came together, the teaching component, the music therapy, and the performing, right? So, and all of it makes sense, The teaching I learned from my students, I teach jazz composition and theory and tuning, as an adjunct, and the questions that the students have, I never thought of it that way, And so, and the art too, the different colors and of art and studying certain artists of Kandinsky, and it was one of my favorite artists, actually, who actually had a very intimate, well, I don't know about intimate, but a very interesting relationship with Schoenberg, So they would correspond letters together around in the early 1900s, where Schoenberg is credited for the atonal music, right? And Kandinsky was credited for the first abstract paintings,
Interesting. Yeah.
So that really interested me, so I would study that. And everything comes together, the creative spirit of art, and music to me, when I play music today, is just a reflection of my accumulative past, right? And I have a much deeper understanding why I'm playing or why I'm writing certain compositions, than just going through chords and just going through scales, So through my life experience from teaching and from art and from performing and studying with this great master and working with these great people through my life, things just come together, and I'm very happy where my life is right now. And I just continue to learn, and learning is ad infinitum, right?
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Yep.
I mean,
we're always learning, for sure.
We're always learning. We could always get better. You know, my wife always said to me, you know, she hears me practicing all the time. Someday you'll get it, Frank.
That's right. We're all trying to get it, aren't we? So let me ask you this: why do you love jazz?
Why do I love jazz? Because it's an expression in the here and now, in the moment, on the very moment, with just pure spontaneous improvisation, right? As opposed to playing in a classical orchestra, which I'm not belittling playing classical music because I love it, and I've played in orchestras. You're reading notes all the time, you know, and you're going under the direction of the conductor, how he wants to make passages legato or staccato or ritardando or accelerando or whatever, you know. And you're in playing in jazz situation as a bass player, you know, strictly speaking about bass, I can change the whole contour of the mood of the music by playing certain routes. I'm basically in the driver's seat, you know. Yeah. So that's not sounding too egotistical. Of course, I'm working, you know, with other musicians as well, and the spontaneous interplay is so exciting to me, you know. Yeah, and sometimes the unknown journey, where you're going to end up, you know. Mm-hmm. My Floating Holiday CD, the first cut, Floating Holiday, I wrote initially in an AABA type of form, you know, and then I said to the guys, I'm just going to start a fast walking line, and we're just going to play. We're not going to play with any chord changes, you know. We're just going to play and see where it goes, and then we'll end it with, you know, going back to the head that I wrote to take it out. So that's really exciting, you know, to play that type of idiom, you know. Well, I remember our first CD with Primary Colors, which was Gerard D'Angelo and David Mead. We would warm up before we rehearsed our tunes. We would warm up and we would just play. We would just play free, you know, to get the cobwebs out. And then when we looked at our music with bar lines and chord changes, it seemed to me that I could just kind of float over those bar lines and look at a little bit more horizontally instead of vertically, you know. And oh wow, this is great that we're doing this, because the music seemed so much more meaningful to me. And that was an interesting way to approach, you know, playing jazz. And I'm comfortable playing behind singers. I'm comfortable playing in a swinging big band, obviously. I'm comfortable playing free music. I think playing free music opens your ears up to a lot more different possibilities, you know. And certainly with the modes that I had said before, that looking at the minor modes and the major modes, and there's so many different, you know, indigenous scales around the world, and opening up your ears to those sounds when you're playing free. They're in your subconscious. They come out, you know. So that's why I love playing jazz.
So let's get a little bit more specific here. Speaking of modes and just kind of seeing where it all goes, everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, your business associates, patients, but you're guiding your vessel. Who do you think you are? When you face the day, who are you?
When I face the day, who am I? I'm just a creative spirit roaming around New York City, playing every day. No, who am I? I like reading books. I like my brain stimulated. I love you know, going to conferences and having going to symposiums where they speak about how your brain reacts to music. You know, I love helping people at Woodhull Hospital, working in inpatient psychiatry and working up in chemical dependency. The clients or patients, whatever you want to, however you want to state what they are, some of them in acute inpatient psych don't even know north, west, south from east, and when they get into music, they can organize their thoughts. I love seeing that. I love knowing that I'm helping somebody in a very distressful state. When I get up in the morning and I go to Inpatient Psych, and I'm helping them a great deal. I believe I am. I know I am, because judging from their affecting in groups, they can come in very melancholy, despondent, and depressed, and playing music. It's amazing. You see them light up. You see them start socializing. You see them start talking. So that's who I am, and I love performing at night. And working with singers, and working with my trio, and working in various situations.
Beautiful.
I look forward very much. I look forward very much to the next day. and my mom, my mother, who just turned 99 last Friday. I still can't believe I'm talking with her, and she's so cognitively intact. That's an inspiration for me to live. To just speak with her on a daily basis.
Beautiful. I love that answer. That's a great way to wrap everything up. Frank, thanks for opening up about Floating Holiday, your life and music, your life and music therapy. It's been fascinating. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you for spending time with me. And I really appreciate your show, and I hope to be listening to it in the near future very shortly.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Brooklyn, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Frank for being such an artistic force in this world. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.